Aloha mai kako, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Moana Nui podcast. I can't believe it's already July, but here we are in the second half of 2021. And it's hot out here, let me just tell you.
Yes, goodness.
But I hope everybody's doing well. Thank you so much for tuning in, whether you're live or on the replay. Be sure to engage with us in the comments. Let us know where you are tuning in from. My name is Moana, and I'm the founder of the Moana Nui podcast. I am also a children's book author for the Adventures of Nakoa and Nohea children's book series, the editor and publisher here at Burning Spear Comics for our flagship series, The Wildcard Chronicles, and a champion of the Indigenous and independent communities. Today, as always, I'm joined by my beautifully talented and yet a little bit exhausted, just like me, Dana.
Aloha, everybody. Yes, it has been, both me and Moana have been going hard to the paint and for the last 2 months. But we are very excited to continue bringing you all great content, some amazing guests. And we're very looking forward to today's guest. For those that may or may not know me, let me introduce myself. I'm Dana. I am a cosplay, event, and con staff photographer. You may have seen my photography with Dragon Con, MomoCon, Anime Week in Atlanta, and even with DC Comics. I'm also a voice actor and an event planner and a whole lot more. And now I'm going to hand it over to the founder and my lovely co-host, the beautiful Moana.
All right. Before we get started, I just want to say hello to Jabbar and J-Man. Thank you guys for tuning in, as always, our loyal listeners. Tonight, we are joined by a wonderful friend of ours. His name is Tyr Jackson, or Tyr. Tyr is the owner, creator, publisher, and editor-in-chief at SoveReign Comics. He is responsible for creating and managing the creation of diverse characters, in-depth character growth, and dynamic storytelling, while also delivering a place where all can come and read inclusive stories. SoveReign Comics' mission is to create comic book stories that show individuals from all walks of life, while expanding the canonical universe, the SoVerse, whether real in the example or fantastical. So let us bring him on. We met Tyr on the Indie Comics Dispatch, and we're really excited to have him on our show tonight. What's up, Tyr?
How you doing?
I am doing well. It's nice to see you again, as always.
Yes.
Glad to be on the show. So
yes,
this is really cool.
Yeah. So Tyr was one of our Kickstarter backers as well. So we absolutely want to thank him for his support and just for being a part of our wonderful community.
Yes.
So as we kick off tonight's show, we'll start with how we usually started, the Pico or the origin story. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how you found yourself in comics.
Okay. So right now I live in Colorado. This is where myself and my family live at. I'm originally from North Carolina. That's where I grew up. And I've been writing for a very long time, honestly, since I was in first grade. That's when I wrote like my first story. But before that, I was really into science fiction and horror, which back then when I was in first grade, horror was Chucky and Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th and Hellraiser, things like that. So like those are the things that I would watch as a kid. So my first story that I wrote was a horror story. At that time I just enjoyed it, but I didn't know what would happen. I just kept writing, and then I coupled it with drawing and things like that. And then I would say as I got into middle school, I really got into it, and I actually wrote my first playwright script in the 7th grade. And my English teacher, my literature teacher, she saw it and saw what I was doing and let me and my friends, act it out. So that was like my first, step into directing. It was in 7th grade. So she let us act it out for extra credit. So that was kind of cool. But her doing that, I think, is what really pushed me forward. And I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. So I had to, got into acting, did a lot of play acting and stuff, tried to step over into Hollywood. I've had callbacks for things, but unfortunately couldn't make some of the callbacks because of, life. But I just kept writing, started creating not this universe, but my first universe in high school, which is a story that I actually plan to bring back into things. But that's where I really got my taste of like, okay, I know where I want to go. I know what I want to do. And with that story, like it was 297 pages handwritten.
Wow.
It was in my blue traffic reader. I'm just writing the script out and everything like that and just building that universe and stuff. So that's where I got my taste of universal building. I went on to college. I got a full ride to a small college called Chowan. I also played football. I was a running back. So when I went to Chowan, I was a starting slot back, but I decided to quit football to concentrate more on art. And then I transferred to North Carolina A&T. So I was Aggie for a little bit. And then I went into the Marine Corps. In the Marine Corps, I didn't draw anymore, but I kept writing. At the end of the Marine Corps, that's when I started working on stories that would eventually become the SoveReign Comics universe or the SoVerse. Didn't even realize it then. But when I got out of the Marines, I went into the Army. My first deployment in the Army was 15 months. If you've been deployed, you already know. If anyone's listening, you've been deployed, deployments are crazy anyway. But a 15-month deployment, I had to do something to take my mind away from things. So that's when I really, really buckled down into writing and really started creating this universe that, like I said, I had no idea it was becoming what it was. And in my green monster, as we call it in the Marine Corps, or your green little notebook, I was writing all of these stories about these twin girls and their present, which is, I was like, it's going to take place in the future, but it was their present. It was like dystopian. It was ruled by a villain. And I kind of got inklings of that from the first universe that I was building because the villains won in the first universe that I was building. So I was like, you know what if I kind of take that, resprinkle it, but change some things here and there. And then as I was doing that, like it introduced time travel because they wanted to know what happened to their world because, their mom and dad were these superheroes, but they lost. So they're like, yo, what happened? Like, well, how did they lose if they were so great? What happened? And that's when I started creating the past. And then creating the past, all of these other titles started popping up out of it. All these other characters and things that I never had thought about, like Cypher Team and Stars and Temple High. And all those things started coming to fruition. So I know I was talking to someone before and I told them about that. And they were like, oh, so you wrote the future first and then wrote the past? I was like, yeah, that's the best way to do time travel stories, I guess, because it worked, and then, yeah, that's how everything started coming to be. And I've just been pushing forward since then. I spent a lot of the time just building the universe, making sure that whenever the stories were told and whenever they were coming out, that they were actually good and they made sense and they drew people in. And it wasn't like they read the book and, oh, okay, I'll see what the next one does. So like it drew them in and they were interested because it built the world, and it kind of, brought them into the world. Published my first book in 2016. And since then I've just been pretty much publishing a book or two every year. Trying to get to the point this year, working on publishing about 3 or 4 books. So it's going to be fun. But yeah, it's been busy. It's been growing. I've enjoyed it. Yeah, just meeting different people through it too. Like that's just been incredible, so yeah, that's me in a nutshell. I try to keep it short.
Yeah, of course. Now, you were talking about your flagship comics,
Mhm,
which is called Cypher Team
mhm,
Alpha.
mhm.
As you were mentioning, that follows the most elite fighting force on Earth, fighting terrorists.
Yeah,
What
your answer.
inspired this story?
So with that one, like I was saying with the twin daughters, initially when I was creating that team, both parents were supposed to be on it. But after a while, I changed my mind on that. So now their dad is just the only one that's on the team. Their mom is the dean of SoveReign Academy, which is the school that's represented in Temple High. So everything started building from that. Initially, in the beginning, I was like, okay, I'm gonna make them like a, just awesome superhero team that's, a la Justice League and X-Men and Avengers. But then I changed my mind because I was like, I have characters in here who who in short don't have a problem taking a life if they have to. So I was like, if I did them as heroes, people wouldn't understand that, really. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I can make them some type of special forces unit or something like that, or anti-terrorism, which for me in my background in Marine Corps, I dealt with anti-terrorism. So I was like, okay, sure. And I know that, and at least in this, I know what I'm talking about. So, so let's bring them into that. So I brought them into the anti-terrorism side of things. And with that, I just started building everything up and started building the characters and getting to know them and getting to figure out who they are. Like there's two individuals up there. They're known as the Gen Hunters, a husband and wife. One of them is a former British Marine commando, and the other one is a former U.S. Marine MARSOC, or aka Raider. So there's actually special forces coming back into special forces. So in building that story, that's where it came from, just figuring out how I wanted it to be. And like I said, after a while, everything's changed because like Kunoichi, and she's a fan favorite, but she's an assassin. So I was like, they're not going to fit this ideal of heroics. A lot of people see them and they think, oh, superheroes. And then they read the story and they're like, did she just stab somebody in the chest? And I'm like, yes, she did. So it's interesting in telling that story, and in that flagship, like I said, from telling the past from those sisters, I decided to make that the flagship because I was like, even though their stories started everything, if we're starting in the past, this team, this unit, they are the epicenter of everything. So they're the ones that are really driving it forward and driving this entire story to the point to where it gets to theirs. I even created a government that they work for, which is known as Temple. And it's on its own country called a Mandla, which is a country for individuals who have powers, but they're also regular humans who live there, because they might have a child who have powers, or they might be married to someone who has powers. So they came to this beautiful, beautiful island that actually floats around the world. So it's always on the move. And the reason why it's like that is because there was an event that caused a lot of trouble, which is going to be in Cypher Team issue 3. So as they started rebuilding things, that was one of the biggest things that they wanted to do, was to increase the defenses on that island and everything, so that they wouldn't have to worry about the things that they had run into in the past. So So yeah, very militaristic, military, very military. So
Yeah, that sounds really cool. I definitely want to check out this comic now.
thank you.
So we talked a little bit about how your experience in the Marine Corps and the Army kind of influenced your storytelling. How did your military service and kind of the discipline that's built being a service member help you to build the rigor at being a creative entrepreneur and dealing with the challenges that we often face as independent creators?
Well, I know for me, one of my biggest things that I brought into my creativity, one of the things from the Marine Corps, adapt and overcome. So every time I run into an obstacle, I see it and I figure a way to adapt and get around it. And then I also in the beginning was telling myself, like, there's a lot of times, and I think a lot of creators have gone through this, where you just get to a point where you're either burnt out, stressed out, and you're just like, I'm done, I'm done. And I would just tell myself, I'm like, dude, you made it off Paris Island. If you don't suck it up and get it together, so those are things that I would tell myself, like, you got off of Paris Island, you went through the suck, you were in third battalion, get it together, so I'm like, okay, get it together, let's take a breath and then go back. So I think a lot of the discipline from that is just understanding and knowing how to just push through the suck, because things do get unbearable sometimes and get aggravating. I do think like in my work ethic, like in the military and stuff like that, there's been times where I was working, and I'll be up, just taking cat naps here and there for like 4 and 5 days. And that's built me in. And was like, okay, well, looks like I got to pull all nighter, and I'm just used to it. I just know how to do it. I just, okay, stay up all night. Let's work, and in the morning, I'll take about a, 30-minute to an hour nap, get back up, get back to work on things. So I think a lot of my discipline came from that. The stressful stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my husband's a Marine as well, and so I see the same qualities, and it's helped me too. So I think that's really cool.
Now, of course, in addition to being a small press publisher and all that it comes with, as we got to see a little small peek, you're also a father.
Yes, I am.
What strategies have you worked for in terms of finding the right work and life balance between family and creating?
Well, the cool thing about them is that they're super creative too, my kids. So they're like, in a sense, my soundboard sometimes. Like, I go and show them something, and my son, he's 11, so he's read almost all of my books. Every book that I publish, I give him one and let him read it. And so he'll come back, and he'll tell me the things that he saw. And sometimes I'll sneak things in the comics, and he'll pick it up, and I'm like, okay, good. And then, like, I remember one time, like, I think it was a Yama Stigmata, he caught something, and I'm like, dude, adults haven't even caught that yet. Good job. So it's like he they're very imaginative. And my daughter, she loves stars, like that's her favorite one. So she just, every time she sees it, she wanted me to read it to her, and then she's 4, so she tries to read it herself. So that helps. But usually I do. At one point I was just really working, and then I realized, hey, my kids need my time. So now I set aside time just for them, and I just spend time with them, whether it's watch a movie or, just chill and play a game, or, I'll cook for them, cook a dinner, and we just sit down and eat and play. And I'll just, we eat dessert and just have fun, ice cream and stuff like that, have fun afterwards. And they really like that, but they've pushed me though, there's been times where I haven't written, and my son will be like, Dad, did you write anything today? And I'm just like, okay, I'll go write something. So it helps. It helps out a lot.
Very nice. And a lot of times we have to have them there. Our kids could either be they motivate us or give us that, or also give us that kick that we need to get things done, because especially as integrated you have your kids with your comics and everything, they're sometimes are more aware than we are. They'll be like you said, them, them telling you, hey, have you wrote anything today?
Yeah, exactly.
What's going on?
Yeah, because like my son, he's even because like Temple High issue 2 is in works right now, and he's like, is it done yet? I'm like, it's almost done. And I show him the pages, and he's like, this is dope. He's like, okay, I'm ready for it to be done, so it helps. And plus, like on that is the motivation of leaving something for them, leaving this empire for them. So that's like another reason why I really push forward to build it. And I take my time with it too, because if I leave this to them, I don't want it to be like a overnight pop-up. Like, I want it to be, it has the fans, they know who they are, and whenever it's time, like, okay, hand it over the keys, everybody's like, oh, okay, yeah, we've been here, we know who they are. They, his son's drawn something, his daughter's written something, we know who they are, so it's like and that's one of the reasons why I take my time, and I'm very methodical about the way that it grows, because I want it to not just grow, but just really, I want it to be more like a tree than a flower, if that makes sense. Like really dig its roots into everything, and you have to cut it down and pull the stump up in order to get rid of it, So
I like that analogy. Trees. So yeah, I think that's really good that your kids are involved and are motivating you. Just having that youthful energy, I find is helpful too. Like as adults, we often get beat up by life.
Oh yeah.
And so having, those little ones giving us energy and kind of reminding us the reason why we're doing this is super cool. Have your kids shown interest in becoming creators too in the future?
Yes, both of them actually. My son is actually in the process of creating his own universe, and I just sit there and I see myself in him so much. Like he's been working on this world and adapting and changing it and all of this stuff since he was, I want to say 6, maybe 5 or 6. And he just started off with these little sketches, and I'm like, "What are you drawing?" And he's like, "Oh, these are these characters, and they're doing this, and there's this intergalactic war in there." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And it's just building over the years. And he's like coming back like, "Hey dad, look, I made a file system. This is everything." And I'm like, "Good job." So, and then like with my daughter, like, sometimes I'll be in her working and she has Barbies and My Little Ponies and all that other stuff. And I'll just hear her. She like literally will create an entire episode of like Barbie meeting My Little Pony. And she'll have like this entire episode that she just creates in her mind. And I'm just sitting here listening to her just play, and they're going through, like, literally they'll start off, they'll have a climax, and then they'll figure it out, just like just like in the shows. And I'm just like, wow, she already understands story development and how stories work. I'm like, that's really cool. So that's something that I'm probably going to start. I'm not to take over their creativity, but to help. Because like when my son is, what I did with him is I have, see all those books. I have a lot of books that I use that I research. And I tell him, like, he'll ask me a question. I'm like, grab one of the books, look through it, figure it out. And I do that not to be the father that doesn't want to tell him, but I want him to understand how to look for things on his own, so that he'll understand that as he grows. Because there's been times where I will ask someone for help, coming up in this, and I've had people give me faulty information on purpose. I've had people not answer, so many things. And that's the reason why I've really modeled, and that's more along the lines of the indie comic world. But that's the reason why I've modeled myself into being, okay, if I want to know, I'm gonna research it. And I know there's a lot of people who say, "Oh, don't research, just do it." I'm just like, I personally can't do that. Like, that's not ingrained in me. I can't, because the whole time I'm writing, I'll be worried about it sucking, or I'll be worried about doing the wrong thing. So it's like, I can't do that. So I have to research stuff. Like, even with the time travel thing, like I have a book back there from Michio Kaku talking about, about parallel worlds. And I read that whole book to understand parallel worlds. Cause I was like, if I'm going to integrate it, I just want to see the scientific ideas and theories behind it, so that I can kind of take some of those jewels and some of those ideas and place it into my own universe. So I do the same thing with him. Like, he'll ask me a question, if he asks me something scientific, I have books back there. If he'll ask me about, perspective and everything, I have books back there. Ask me about lettering, I have books back there. I have a book from drawing words from Brian Michael Bendis that's back there, and I let him read that, So I have a lot of different things back there to, just to help, with understanding certain development in the comic creating world. So
awesome. Now, of course, your kids are, motivating you, but who has been your biggest supporter and cheerleader along the way, and how have they continued to build you up and keep pushing you forward?
In the beginning, I would say my mom. She probably still is, really, because she's in North Carolina still, and she just be telling people all the time. Like, somebody say, I wish I can do this, but I'm not a good drawer. She's like, my son can draw. Here's his number. Like she is always pushing me. It's like, yeah, he makes comics. This is his website. This is, and she's always pushing me. Like, my mom is probably my number one fan, like, thoroughly. Like, I've had people reach out to me, like, yeah, I talked to your mom, and she said that it was okay to email you. And I'm like, I email her, and I'm like, Mom, who did you get my email to? You know, so like, who are you talking to? You know, who are you telling folks stuff? But for her, she's probably my biggest fan. Like even all the way from me naming my company, I think that she knew I would go that path. Because when me and my sister were younger, when we lived in Miami for a little bit, we both used to model. We both were actually stepping into acting and stuff like that then as kids. So she saw that in us and saw, okay, so yeah, he's very good at acting. So whenever I got older, like she started putting me in plays and things like that. And like I was saying before the show, that's when I started trying to move into the whole acting world and stuff. But life, you know, her having to work, you know, and her and my dad having to work and stuff like that. I'm like, hey, I have a call back. We got to go to Wilmington. Oh, can't go. Got to work. You know, I'm just like, okay, well, we need that money. So, so I understood, you know. But yeah, she was a big push. Even with the naming of my company, because one of the things she told me, because I remember growing up and stuff like that, she always wanted all of us, me, my sister, and my little brother, to have our own businesses and do our own things. So she would always tell us, you know, name your business after yourself. You know, I'm like, you know, and even then I was like, you know, Tyrone, anything that just doesn't sound good to me. So like I got older and I remember I was trying to find the company name. And she and I called her and she was like, well, name it Tyrone. I'm like, Mom, Tyrone Comics doesn't sound that good to me. But because of that, and because of me knowing the meaning of my name, meaning you know, leader or ruler or king, which is pretty much based off the Irish king, who also goes by his name was Tyrone. Also, I was like, okay, so if I use my name, what can I name it? And then I was like, well, kings have, you know, they rule over a sovereign, you know, and I was like, huh, sovereign comics. I'm like, that actually sounds good. And so I named it that. And I told her like a couple of years later, I'm like, yeah, that's where I got my name from. And she was just like, told you to use your name, you know? So, so it was pretty cool. So yeah, but she's probably, I would say, my number one fan, thoroughly. So
Nice.
We love moms.
oh yeah. And my dad too. My dad was very supportive too. Like my dad, he never watched cartoons or anything like that. But when I was writing my stories in high school, like he would read the script, he would look at the characters and stuff like that, and he'd be like, "If this was a cartoon, I'd watch it." I'm like, "Really? So if I made a cartoon, you'll watch it, but you won't watch other cartoons." So in a sense, though, like I was looking at it like, "Oh, okay," but it beefed me up a little bit. I'm like, "Okay, well, if I can get you to watch this." Like if you say you'll watch this if it become a cartoon, I was like, I'm gonna keep pushing until this becomes a cartoon, and we're gonna watch it, you know. So
Nice.
Yep, that's what's up. We need more cartoons.
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah,
That's the long game, right?
oh yeah. Eventually, well, I get there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we get that all the time. Like when we be pitching the story and stuff, people are like, "So when's the movie coming out?" It's like, well, that's the long-term vision, you know. For that to happen, please support these comic books.
Yeah, exactly. Like I've had folks ask me that too. Like, oh, when you get animation and when you're doing this, I'm like, that costs money, and they're like, well, how much? I'm like, well, geez, some animations like they start off at 20,000-30,000, and that's just for 5 minutes.
Right.
Like we're not talking about an entire episode, you know, and then we're going to do an entire season. So my biggest thing is, like I tell folks, I'm like, if that's what you want to see us get to, just keep supporting us like you're doing, keep spreading the word, and I'll keep building content. I'm like, because for me, that's the most important thing, is to get enough content. So when it's time for that, I can actually call the shots a little more, because I can be like, hey, you know, there's like over 100 comics. You know, I've been doing this. I've built the popularity. So if I'm saying that folks are going to like it this way, they're going to like it that way. So that's my big thing right now, is content and more support. And then eventually it'll get there. Most definitely. Yeah,
absolutely. I love it. So you've been doing this for a while. I mean, we talked about how you've been writing since you were, you know, in the first grade, and you've been creating along the way and passing on that legacy to your children as well. What has been the most memorable experience of your creative journey so far?
I think my most memorable experience, which I carry with me now, I learned how to write um scripts, learn how to script and everything when I was in seventh grade. And everybody remembers the literature books that we used to read, and how you read Romeo and Juliet and, Hamlet, all these plays, Shakespeare plays and stuff like that. And the way they did the scripts in there so that you can read it in class and somebody will play a certain role and read it. So that's what I used as my reference to write a script. So I just started learning. And like one of my stories that I wrote, I was just like, I want to write it in the script form. And I started using that. And I remember my seventh grade teacher, she saw what I was doing and she just thought that it was really interesting. I think at first she thought I was like copying from the book verbatim, like word for word. And then she looked closer and she's like, oh, wow, you're writing an actual story as a script. And what she ended up doing was she allowed me and some of my friends to act out the story for extra credit. And the cool part was like other kids in the class wanted to come and act. So like that was in seventh grade, that was like my first touch into directing things. And of course, as a seventh grader, you don't really know what you're doing. I was trying, but we put on this impromptu play and stuff. Like there were some students who like wanted to make the props. Like there was a bus in it. So like someone took like cardboard and made like the side of a bus and everything like that we used. It was really cool, and that for me, like that's a very memorable moment for me. And I carried that with me because I was like, it was more like one of those things like not only was my family seeing what I could do, but my teacher saw what I can do too. And then of course, growing up, all of my other teachers, like my art teacher when I was in high school, saw what I could do. My math teacher noticed what I can do. Like, and my art teacher, I think she sent a tape to, well, not a tape, but she sent information about me. And I think she went to my coach and got a tape and ended up sending it to the University of Southern California to get me into the script writing program over there. And I got letters in the mail from that. And my mom saw them and she was like, you're talking to USC? I'm like, what? And I got these letters. And she was like, you're not going over there. That's too far. She was like, you're not going to California, because she was like, that's on the opposite side. She was like, that's too far. But yeah, it was that. And then I think another memorable moment for me where it was the aha moment and the wake up call was when I went into the Army, and we were deployed during that 15-month deployment. And I was actually digitizing my stories that I had wrote in my little, my green notebook. And my Sigo was like looking over my shoulder as I was digitizing this stuff. And she was reading it the whole while. And I was in the zone, so I really had no idea she was there. It's like I felt body heat, but I just thought someone's back was turned to me. So I didn't think she was actually looking at what I was doing. And then she was just tapping me. She was like, Jackson. And I was like, ma'am. She was like, why are you here? And I was like, what do you mean? And she just looked at my story and she pointed at the screen. She was like, why are you here? She was like, I was reading this the whole time. She was like, this is amazing. She was like, why are you in the military? And that was the click. And I was like, okay, it's time for me to get back on it. So, but yeah, those are like two of the things that I would say for me that was really, really memorable that I carry, that let me know that, hey, you're on the right path. So.
Exactly. Now, of course, we talk about the memorable moments, but
Mhm.
in the journey of creating and especially establishing your brand as SoveReign Comics, what is the most challenging part about creating content for SoveReign Comics?
The creating the stories is easy for me. But as far as the content, I think the most challenging part is like trying to figure out what folks want to see, I think is the most challenging part. But after a while, just talking to some of the cosplayers that I sponsor and stuff like that, and some of the other creators that I talked to, they were just like, dude, just post, just show people things, just post it. And I just started doing that. And like when I started doing that, everything started building a little more. And I was like, oh, okay. And I think other than that, like the next hardest thing for me to do is like get the word out there, because now, in the digital age, there's so many people creating comics. There's so many things going on. So, you're just a fish in this pond of a bunch of other fish. Then you have bigger fish, you have small fish, you have all these fish. So it's just that part, just getting that attention and getting folks to see what it is that you're doing. So not too long ago, I decided myself, I was like, okay, I'm just going to concentrate on those who are here now rather than reaching out to folks who may or may not like, the stories of what I'm doing. And in that, I noticed a huge change, because now that I'm just concentrating on those individuals, they're spreading the word. They're telling folks about it. Like I said, there's cosplayers cosplaying my characters, which I thought that would never happen. Like, to me, that's just insane. And every time someone dresses up as one of my characters, I'm just, here I am, this grown man fighting back tears because I'm like, holy crap, you just brought my character to life. So to me, that's insane. But yeah, now they're spreading the word and they're telling other folks about it and reaching out to individuals and things like that. And then I have people coming to me and they're following me and stuff. And I ask like, oh, how did you hear about me? Oh yeah, I follow this cosplayer and she dressed up as your character. So I decided to follow you. Or, someone tagged you in a post and everything. And I asked them about comics and stuff. And they said, oh, go check out this person. These are the comics that I read. I just bought these. It was good, and I'm like, okay, all right. Made the right decision. Concentrate on my part of the pond, and then we'll grow out. So
fantastic. So a little birdie told us that the vision for SoveReign Comics is growing, and you have a team stepping up to help. What do you have in store next? What projects can we expect from you?
We have a lot of story next. We actually have a little podcast that we're going to be doing because 2 of the cosplayers are actually going to BlurredCon. I'm not going this year, but hopefully I can go to BlurredCon next year. But we're going to do a little podcast and stuff like that. And they're going to dress up as the characters, and we're just going to talk to them and stuff like that so folks can get to know the characters. So we have that coming up. I have Triple High issue 2 that's coming out soon. We're about halfway finished with that. I have 4 new titles that are going to be coming out. 2 of them should be coming out. Well, 2 of them should be coming out this year. One's going to come out as an Ash Can, which is going to be our very first Ash Can. I've never done that before. But with this title in particular, I want to see what folks would feel about it, because I'm actually going back to my roots. I'm going, which is horror. That was the first story I ever wrote. Even in 7th grade, the story I wrote was a horror story that they let us act out in the class. So I'm going back to my roots. And I was the type of person like Hellraiser is one of my favorite horror movies. So you can expect some very creepy, fantastical things going on in this story. But yeah, like we have a lot of things coming out. Some expansion for sure. Some things I'm gonna keep secret because I'm doing some rearranging of some titles. But yeah, there's gonna be some stuff. Sorry about that. So I got mainly some expansion, like some really big expansion that's going on. I have an individual who's working on a story that's gonna breathe life into one of the environments that I have, because I have a couple of different ones. And then with that horror story, that's gonna be one of the first titles that's gonna be bringing forth Sovereign Black, which is something that I've mentioned a lot. Like I've been mentioning that since I think my first book publishing in 2016, because I knew it was coming. I just didn't know when. So Sovereign Black is going to be one. Then there's Sovereign One. And that's something that I stood up for folks who want to create a story under Sovereign, and I help them publish it, but it not be part of the main stable. I also have a title that's going to be coming that's part of Sovereign Cubs, which is more for the kids to help them, for early literacy and stuff like that. And then there's another one that I'm not going to mention yet, but it already has 2 titles. So one of the titles is already done, like already been worked on. I'm just moving it over there to kind of be the centerpiece of that one. So there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work. Have a Kickstarter coming up this month because I still have some awards that I'm sending out. So I've been waiting because my big deal is like I don't I just don't want to start the next Kickstarter until everybody's received their stuff. So once everybody receives it, I'm like, all right, we're launching. Because I want folks to read it first, instead of be like, well, dang, I haven't read issue 1. You're already doing the Kickstarter for issue 2, so I want folks to read it, at least have it. But yeah, it's going to be for Cypher Team issue 2. And I'm going to be using the funds for that, of course, to fulfill it. But then also get issue 3 going, because issue 3 really dives into the world, and really, like, a lot of the hints you get from issue 1 and issue 2 about things that have happened in the past, and you kind of hear these mumbles and stuff, like when you're reading it, of certain things, like they'll mention No More Miamis or events from 10 years ago, all of these other little stuff, and you're just like, because I've had people come back and they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, just wait for it, it's coming. I'm a slow burn type of writer, like, I love to write and gradually just suck people in. They're like, what are you talking about? I don't get it. I'm like, just wait for it. And then when it's revealed, they're like, oh, well, crap, I did not. I'm glad I waited for that, So Cypher Team issue 3 is going to have a lot of stuff in it, and it's going to that's when we're really going to understand the SoVerse portion of the SoveReign Comics universe as a whole. That's when we're going to actually understand everything. We're going to know why Sorbonne Academy is what it is. We're going to know why this title called Stop that's coming out also this year. We're going to know why they were created. We're going to know why, and for instance, Cypher Team issue 1, this isn't a spoiler because it's on the front of the book. It's called Reactivated. We're going to know why they're being reactivated. You start finding out everything, and then it's going to make things a little more clear for those who like, their cake and their meal at the same time. You're going to start understanding everything. So
yes, and of course, reactivated insinuates there was an original activation, right? So
Yep. They were originally activated for something, but no one knows. They'll find out.
Exactly.
I like it.
Now, I do see from our audience, someone is asking, what books of yours would you recommend to readers familiar to your work?
For those unfamiliar to my work, I would, that's a good question. I usually tell people to start off with Cypher Team because, like I said, it's the flagship. But if you really want to see like my writing chops and just the things that I do, and one of the things I'm constantly complimented on is my dialogue, I will say Temple High or Stars, especially if you're into dialogue, one of those two, especially Temple High, because they're in high school. So I really reached back into high school, and I just remember all the, high school, like we're joking on each other. You got cliques, you got all this other stuff. And I just took it and I'm like, bam, right here in Temple High. And people saw it. And like, I've had people come to me and they'll see a character and they're like, I hate her. And I'm like, I did my job. You're supposed to, so it's really cool. I would say if you want to get to know the universe and get to know the lingo and the lore and get into that, definitely Cypher Team issue 1. But if you just want to dive into a book and pick up a book and just see the type of writer that I am, I would say Temple High or Stars.
And for these books, where could they find them out? Of course, you're going to have an upcoming Kickstarter soon in the future, but some of the issues and books that are currently out there, where can they purchase them at?
So if you go to my website, SoveReignComics.com, SoVereign comics.com, and the shop tab, just click on the shop tab and it'll take you to my store, and they're all in there. Then there's digital options and there's physical options. So if you don't want to get the physical option just yet, get the digital. Or if you're not into physical, because I know some folks, like me, like I like physical and digital because I like to carry my comics around. Like if I'm flying, you can't carry your collection on the plane. So they're all on my iPad in my Dropbox or something like that, so I can pull them out and read them. So that's there for that too. I've even had people who start off with digital and they're like, oh, I'm just going to get digital and, get used to things. And they'll come back and they're like, I'm buying the physical. I want the physical, so you have the option, digital or physical.
Nice.
Yes, very smart with that. We need both. We need our options because we gotta have the
Oh, yeah.
signed one, and we have like the reader one.
Exactly.
Yep. Exactly. Which I'm gonna start adding that option to the signed one, because I'm working with my printer to do some really, really cool stuff. So in this Kickstarter, there's gonna be a lot of firsts for SoveReign Comics in this Kickstarter. Things that I've been wanting to do, but I'm very like, once I find the thing that works for me, like I'm like, okay, I'm there until either you give me a reason not to be there anymore, or you say we're closing up shop. And that's my printer, Comics Wellspring. Like, I've been working with them since 2016. The crazy part is, like, they're a great printer. Like, they also helped me. Like, I remember the first book I printed, it was so bad. It was it was so bad. And they even asked, they sent an email, like, are you sure you want to print this book this way? And I didn't know. Like, I didn't know anything then because I was just learning, you know. And I was like, yeah, print it. And my friend got it. He makes comics also, and he lives in Detroit, which Comics Wellspring is in that area. And he picked them up for me. He showed me, and he was like, yeah, you might have to work on that a little bit. So when I saw them, I'm like, well, this isn't their fault. This is clearly my fault. And I was like, and they did ask me, was I sure if I wanted to print this? And for me, the type of person I am is I want to hear the truth. And they told me the truth. So I was like, you know what? I can respect that. You know, it's more than just money for them. Like, they really want to help you, you know, create a good book. So I've been working with them for the longest, and now they're doing some things that they weren't doing before. And like I said, in this Kickstarter, it's gonna be a lot of stuff. Like, I love doing trading cards. I love doing stickers, things like that. So there's gonna be some very dope trading cards that are gonna be Kickstarter exclusive that you are not. Like, once this Kickstarter is over, that's it. Like, there's going to be books. Once this Kickstarter over, that's it. Like, even this shirt that I got to see what it looks like, and this is from Panels in issue 2. This is only going to be in Kickstarter, and that's it. Like, you'll never see this design again after the Kickstarter is done. So, but yeah, it's going to be a lot of firsts for us in this Kickstarter, which is one reason why I think I keep pushing it, because I'm like, I want to make sure it's right, you know. So. But
awesome. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're adding that signed option, because as Moana knows, anything I buy from any of the indie comic creators, I gotta have it signed. So so when that Kickstarter hit, I want to have that option that I can have you sign everything that I buy.
Of course. Yeah, I usually with Kickstarters, I usually do that. It's just in the store I haven't done that, so I'm thinking about adding that to the store as an option where it's just like, hey, do you want to sign? You know, because I know some people do and some people don't. And that's one of the reasons why I don't, whenever I send books out, I don't just sign them, because I learned that in Kickstarter, because at one point I was doing that. Like, I was sending books out, I don't just sign it. And then when I was like, you know what, when I did the Kickstarter, I was like, you know, let me ask. And I noticed a lot of people were like, no, please don't. Please don't sign the book. And I'm just like, oh, people don't want that. And that's the reason why I've been trying to figure out how I'm going to do it for the store, so that folks will have the option to say, yes, I want to sign, or no, I don't want to sign. But for the Kickstarters, it's definitely there. And I also give the option to either sign on the cover or sign on the inside cover, because I know some folks do want it signed, but they don't want it on the cover because they just want to see the art. So I do that also. And of course, the option of not getting it signed. So you will definitely have the option. And you can pick where you want it to sign it, whether it's the cover or the inside cover. So
awesome. So that's what you need to just do for the store. Just make an entry after, as they're checking out. It's like an option. You know, a lot of times where people have like make notes for the seller or stuff like that. You have there, if you would like your book signed or everything, please say who you want it addressed to, blah blah blah, and they put it in the box. Or they can say, no, I don't want it signed. And there you go. There's your workaround.
There you go. Now I'm going to go to my store when I get out, when we're done, and try to work that in there.
Oh, Moana, she's muted.
Oh, she's muted?
Yeah, there you go.
It happens.
Oh my gosh, y'all. Clearly I need a nap. I was just saying what's up to Ryan and Mike, who joined us here. And Brad said that he's like, thank you, I'm gonna get an order placed shortly. So whoop, whoop.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome support there.
Yes.
from Brad. Yeah, Brad's a big supporter of the indie community as well.
Thank you, Brad. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So the Kickstarter that's coming up, that's going to be for Cypher Team?
Yep, Cypher Team issue 2. And things do go off the rails. Cypher Team issue 2. That's why I usually tell people, like, because they'll ask, they're like, okay, Cypher Team issue 1 and Cypher Team issue 2. They're like, what's the difference? I'm like, well, Cypher Team issue 1 will get you used to the characters. I mean, there's some crazy stuff that goes on in it. Like this character right here. Well, hold on, because I flipped. But yeah, that's Kunoichi. She's a fan favorite. There's a scene where she does something and people like I had people come back and they're just like, did she really just do what I think she did? And I'm like, what do you think she did? And they'll tell me, and I'm like, yeah. And they'll be like, what's a halo drop? And I'm like, that's high altitude, low open. And they're like, how high are they? I'm like, very, very high. They're like, holy crap. So there's stuff that happens in issue 1, but there's also that briefing part in there too, which a lot of my friends who are prior military and stuff like that, they'll read that part and they're like, man, I felt like I was back in the talk. Like it was all coming back, like getting this mission brief before we go on this mission. And I was like, yeah, I've been in there a couple of times, I've been in there a lot. So, so you get that in issue 1, but in issue 2 is like the wheels fall off. And it's literally action from page 1 all the way to the end. And just not just action for action's sake, but there's action and dialogue. The story's still building, and it's just building up this point of where you're like, okay, something doesn't feel right, and then it happens, and then you're like, that's why it didn't feel right, which I don't want to, say what happens, of course, because I want people to read it.
Spoilers.
But but you do get that, and I've had people fall in love with some of the characters that show up.
Awesome.
So it's dope. Like I have actually 2 people cosplaying 2 of them. So
nice.
Yeah, so they'll be done. I can't wait to post those and show the world those cosplays because it's gonna be dope. So
I'm actually glad that you brought up the point about it not being actions for action's sake, because I've read comics. Well, can't read if there's not a lot of dialogue, but I've looked at comics where I've seen like the art's beautiful, but I'm like, okay, but where's the story? Like I need it to be, like a little bit of a balance of both. And I find that's, the challenge oftentimes with comics. It's like, what's the right balance of letting the art tell a story, but also building the dialogue?
Exactly. That was one of the things that I think was my biggest fight, because I came from prose and movie scripts and play scripts and stuff like that. So I'm very into dialogue and telling the story literally. So like going to comics where it's more visual because you have the artwork and stuff like that. And a lot of people really do just buy comics for the visual part of it. I had to figure out how to balance that dialogue and that visual. So one of the things that I started doing is like I would write my script, I'll send it to the artist, or I'll thumbnail it myself, and then I will look at it. And if I could tell, like, even because there's been times where I've done stuff where I couldn't tell what was going on, and I'm like, oh, okay, time to reword this, time to redo this. So it's like if I can look at the panels and I can look at the panels and read the dialogue without reading the dialogue, then I'm like, okay, that's good. It matches nicely. So that's one of the things that I did, and that's something that I really bring into the comics. And one of the things that with my lead art team, like we really try to work on. And I told him, I want it to be able to, if I were to snatch the letters off the words, that it would still tell the story. Like it just won't be things blowing up everywhere, and you gotta wait for the, word balloons to figure out what's going on, the word balloons and the captions and everything, just figure out what's going on. And then also I wanted to where if I were to take the art off and put just the word balloons and the captions, you could still read that and still get a, picture it, in your head. You can picture the panels in your head as it's going. So that's like my personal balance, what I use to make sure that the books are nice, a nice balance of art and story.
Very nice. Now, of course, outside of this, are we going to expect anything else like that? You're going to be doing any partnerships, any collabs with any indie comic book writers, Marvel, DC? I mean, I'm going to put it out in the atmosphere.
Never know. Like, honestly, if DC were to like read, somebody in DC were to read one of my books, like if they were to read Stars and come to me and say, "Hey, we want you to write a title with a female lead," I'd be like, Vixen. That's what I want. I want Vixen. Or if they were to read, Temple High, to see how I deal with teachers and stuff like that, and was like, "Hey, we want you to write a book with students or write a book with something else," I'd be like, "Okay, Black Lightning." That's like, those are my two with DC. If I Vixen and Black Lightning, those are the ones I want to do. But yeah, if they asked, like, I would not have a problem writing a story for them. Same with Marvel. The thing with Marvel is like I would have to figure out which one I want to do. Like, it probably honestly probably Blade, only because that's probably the one that I want to write. And I'm like, my horror, like, honestly, it probably have to go into Marvel Knights if I wrote Blade, because it wouldn't be for the kids to read. If I wrote Blade, it's gonna have to go into Marvel Knights if I did that. But yeah, those would be the ones I would want to do. Like, and if they did, that would be crazy. I don't have any crossovers planned. There are creators of other books that I am working with that I'm writing. Like, some person, I'm writing a story for them and they're writing a story for me. So there's that. And then my friend who I mentioned earlier, Thomas, he has his own comic book universe. And he draws, like, for one of mine, he designs the mechs, and the artist that works with him is also the artist on that book. So we work together with that. And I do plan on writing a story for him in the future. And I'm hoping that he will write art. And I'm pretty sure he would. If I was like, "Hey, you want to write art for Arisha Exos?" He'd probably be like, "Oh, most definitely." So I do have those, but it's like nothing really written in stone yet. But
keeping the options
open. You never know what the future holds.
Yeah,
definitely.
Awesome. All righty. Well, it was such a pleasure to have you on tonight. It's always great to catch up with friends. A little bummed you won't be at BlurredCon, but hopefully you can come next year so we can hang out.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yes, hanging out in person. You're close enough, right? Like, cause are you still in North Carolina or no?
I'm in Colorado now.
That's right. You could say that.
But I could definitely get there. I'll fly or drive my car. I'll probably drive. Because I have a lot of stuff and I don't want to pay that extra money to get stuff there. And then a lot of people have told me in the past, "You could just ship it." I'm like, that's still a lot of money when I can just put it in my trunk and go. So I'll probably drive there. My car is pretty fast. I get there decently. Try not to get a speeding ticket.
Yeah, you gotta be careful, especially in some of those places in Colorado.
Oh yeah, That's the reason why whenever I go east, like, I don't go through Texas anymore.
Yes,
that's just a very long state, and I don't want to have to deal with that. But two, like, those cops are out there, so
I'm like, nope. Texas.
Yeah, and
especially now. Let's not forget sundown towns. All right. Yep. All righty. Well, we definitely enjoyed having you on the show, and guys, please check him out, SoveReign Comics, on both Instagram and Facebook, and be ready when the Kickstarter launches, because you definitely want to check out Cypher Team Alpha. But before we tune out, we're going to do our giveaway. I forgot to announce at the beginning, but we are still doing the giveaway. So let us share our screen.
There you go. So if you've been commenting if you've been watching the show, if you're commenting, you get a chance. By you commenting, that's giving you a chance to be in the drawing. So that participating, watching, and interacting has its perks on the Moana Nui podcast.
That's right. All righty. Let's see. Hopefully it won't choose us.
I know.
Hey, congratulations, Brad.
Congrats, Brad.
Awesome.
That's awesome. That is.
So Brad, drop in the DMs and give me your mailing address, and we will send you a nice bundle from the family here at Moana Nui Podcast. It's a small token of appreciation for being a loyal supporter of our show. Thank you for tuning in, as always.
Yes.
That is awesome.
Alrighty. Well, be sure to check out the Moana Nui Podcast here on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, and help us continue to build this wonderful show. If you found value in tonight's content, please hit the share button and help us raise awareness and continue to grow our community. We appreciate all of you for spending your time with us. Be sure to come back in 30 minutes for our second episode of the evening. We'll be chatting with Leo Chan at Levitate Style and getting to know a little bit more about him and his career in the fashion influencer industry. So thank you all again for joining tonight, and we hope you are safe and healthy. Be good to each other. Have a great summer. Enjoy, but stay safe at the same time.
Thank you.